Beautiful. That's going to be fantastic. Now, we're obviously going to be having the best time ever during that weekend. You're going to be bringing the raw water, I assume. Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, let's get into water now. There's a lot going on with spring water now. This is something that you and I have played a very pivotal role in, especially over the last 5 years. Now something's really rocking. There's like people out there getting spring water and they're making it happen. Let's jump into the latest insights in spring water hunting from right from your mouth, Daniel. What is happening? What are you finding? What's coming to you being an avatar for spring water research in the world?
Well, I think, there's a whole spectrum of information there on the water thing. And so there's from the very basics up to the more advanced. But on the very basic level, I think what people are finally starting to realize is that the surface of the Earth has essentially been effectively contaminated by industrial pollution, by nuclear pollution, by petrol pollution. We've managed as a species to contaminate most everything on the surface of the Earth. What's so fascinating to me about this is, aside from the structure of water, aside from the liquid crystal properties of water, aside from some of the more powerful metaphysical properties of the water, on a very simple, grounded level, the water that's in springs has been contained in aquifers for thousands of years, and that means that water has never seen any of this contamination that's on the surface of the Earth. Because it was underground before the contamination started. I mean, we are really only a couple hundred years into the Industrial Revolution. So there's still water on the Earth that has never been in the Earth, that's never seen any pollution. And that water comes to the surface as springs. And so what's so really amazing to me is that people can go to a spring and they can gather their own water. I mean, if you went to a spring and you gathered a 5-gallon bottle of water, and over the course of a few days you drank all of that water, say over the course of a week, you would essentially change out all the water in your body and replace it all with this new water that's never been contaminated. Essentially, you can, just with water alone, you could make 75% of your body, which is water. If you figure 65 to 75% of the body is water, you could essentially become 75% made out of the cleanest substance that's available anywhere on the Earth. Because when you go to a spring, that water that's coming up is probably the cleanest thing you'll ever touch. Because once anything's been on the surface for very long, it's seeing radioactive elements, it's seeing BPA, it's being contaminated by heavy metals, but when it's been underground like that, it's still perfectly clean. So the idea that somebody who's lived a completely standard American lifestyle could in 1 week make 75% of their body out of the cleanest substance we have access to is so profound to me. It's what motivated me to create findaspring.com. It's what I think has motivated a lot of people to start promoting that website. It's what's motivated the community to use that website and to build that database. And, I think it's a path that you really helped set me on, David, years ago when I came to you asking what water filter I should buy, and you kind of just shut me down and told me, hey, look, man, you got to go to the springs. And that's revolutionized my life, and it's led me to, create this website where people are all over the world are not just going to visit springs, but are putting new springs on all the time, so that database is continuing to grow and people have access finally to wild water all over the world.
Super cool. That website, again, is findaspring.com, nonprofit resource that's open to everybody. So you can find out where your local springs are, and what a tremendous impact that's having around the world. So thank you for that, Daniel. We are, of course, big fans of water. We're big fans of super herbs. Let's share it with everybody. And it's great to just be able to pass it along and pay it forward to all the folks out there as inspiration. Now let's talk a little bit about water and cellular regeneration, Glenn, because this is an area where we're getting a lot more information recently. And one of the things I get more than anything else out there is, what about the Kangen water machine? And just for the record, I am against ionizer machines, and I am not into alkaline water. I can give you many different examples of alkaline water that's totally toxic. And I can also give you many examples of acidic water that's also totally toxic. I can give you great examples of acidic water that's wonderful for you, and even a few examples of alkaline water that's good for you. Generally, we want the water to be acidic. That's how nature puts out its cold springs. Its cold water coming out of the earth is actually somewhere between a 5.8 and a 7.2 pH. usually. And of course, above 7 would be considered alkaline. Below 7 is considered acidic. And you want that because that's the hydrogen. And this is what I like to do is I like to drink a lot of spring water. And then over the years, I've gotten into making teas and living on teas as much as possible, which allows you to get a lot more water into your body. If you're a raw foodist, if you're a juicer, if you do a lot of blended stuff, you're going to have a lot of liquid in your body anyway, but there's no substitute for actual spring water. And I was talking with Nassim a couple nights ago. It was last night or a couple nights ago. Anyway, he told me that he had confirmed the research on DNA and that the DNA is defined and surrounded by the highest quality water in your whole body, the most highly structured water in your whole body, and your DNA will hold out for years if necessary and be dehydrated if it cannot get that quality water. And that moment you put that noble spring water into your body, boom, then at that second your DNA is nourished and it feeds right in. This is at the very center of cellular metabolism, is we have to have that very high grade charged water that's natural. And that's spring water from the source as it's gushing out of the ground. And those of us who've done that and been doing that and have had those experiences, we know that that's the best water ever. You feel it right away. The area around the cell is controlled by the sodium and potassium balance. So if we have been coming off of the conventional diets of America, Canada, Europe, wherever we're tuning in from, Australia, then we're going to be heavily salted because salt is used as a preservative in almost everything. And that can change the quality of our cellular environment. So in the beginning, it's a good idea to get off all salts of all kinds and allow the bad salt to come out and flush out, drink lots of water. Nature's solution to pollution is dilution. But eventually we're going to have to turn it around and actually have some salt in our diet because we are a balance of water and salt. We get the toxic salt out by going on a low or no salt diet for a while, and then we gradually come back onto the right kind of salt, like sea salt. I really like Hawaiian sea salt. That's my favorite. Second would be New Zealand sea salt. That's what we should look for. And then when you come back onto the salt, you're in a different osmotic balance, but you have to have some sodium in order for your body to move nutrients in and out of cells. And sometimes that amount of sodium is more than what you think. I had an email come in last night from a woman who is a very good friend of mine and was having a lot of trouble getting up off a couch. Just couldn't get up and would get dizzy and spun out and was wondering what's going on. That's low blood pressure. That's the opposite side of high blood pressure. And sometimes that can happen just because we're low in salt. You just put a little bit of sea salt in water, you drink that, and you get your blood pressure back up to where it's supposed to be. And that's one of those symptoms that helps us know where our balance is, where we've had too little salt. And of course, if we bloat up, then we've had too much. And if we have swelling, for example, at our ankles or under our eyes, then we know we've had too much salt. So there is a balance to these things. If we do it all right, then every cell will be charged. There'll be a lot of juice and particularly water, that's salt water in between all the cells, and all the electricity and nutrients can move around freely, unobstructed in a happy environment.
So let's talk a bit about how to find this water, because I know you hear this question more than anything else. Well, I live in the city, or where can I find a good spring? For those of us who don't really have springs accessible, which is a lot of people actually, who do live in cities, what do you recommend we do to find really good water? And as I'm sure you're going to say, I'm sure you've heard a lot, is distilled water an option because it's the cleanest, quote unquote, cleanest?
Well, there's many different options. There's water that can advance your consciousness. There's water that can hold you in the same consciousness. There's water that can actually degrade your consciousness. And water is the carrier of consciousness. I just want to put that out there. In fact, when I was talking with Nassim, the physicist, the other day, and when we were going through this whole thing on water, he said water is the perfect metaphor for the energy that comes out of the vacuum, the way it flows, what it does, its tendency to vortex, and all of that. These are, by the way, things we want to be thinking about. The natural hydrological cycle of the earth creates very highly ennobled water. That's part of the natural cycle. To imitate that is almost impossible. In fact, it is impossible at our present state of consciousness and technology. There's a whole thing about the technological innovations that are coming that I can't even get into, Len. I mean, Nassim laid it bare before me. He's developed a device that actually generates power from nothing. And the energy that comes off of it purifies all water in the local environment, purifies it. And he's tested that in his lab where he's taken water that was polluted, pushed it closer to that particular generator, and it purifies and burns up all the impurities or implodes them or gets rid of them. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that will come down the pipe later that we'll, learn a lot more about the nature of water and the fundamentals of pure water. If we're stuck, I recommend spring water in glass, and if you can spin it or vortex it any way, even swinging it around in the bottle, that improves the water. If you're stuck beyond that, and you're like, well, look, all we got is distilled water, it's the only thing I can trust, that's fine, but that's the most destructured water. It has the least amount of consciousness in it. Putting a little sea salt in it, putting it under the moon, spinning it, giving a little bit of lemon juice to it, can make it accessible and useful. But again, it's not going to nourish our DNA with that ennobled substance of water. And by the way, that water that surrounds our DNA, apparently, and I never knew this, Len, I've been studying water for years, I just found this out. Apparently, that water that surrounds our DNA is so dense that it actually will not freeze until minus 100 degrees. That's the research that I read. It blew my mind. I was never taught any of that, never saw that anywhere. But that's what that research states, because it's so highly structured, it cannot freeze.
So let's talk about somebody who's on a limited budget. Would you recommend this scenario? Is it better to drink, say, 2 8-ounce glasses of the best water you can find and then supplementing your diet perhaps with fresh squeezed vegetable and fruit juices than it is to drink okay water but drink a ton of it?
No, I always believe you don't need that much water, although in the beginning you might. I would take the first choice. I would always take the vegetable juices and all the hydrating raw foods and then drink a little bit of water, say 2 8-ounce glasses, then try to slug down a bunch of toxic water. Definitely. There's a lot to be said for the hydration that comes from vegetable juices and fruit juices, but I don't emphasize that too much because people get hung up on that, and all of a sudden they're coming to me saying, hey, I haven't even needed water for like 2 months, which is a dangerous situation to get into, because I've seen people who got very dehydrated who were raw food people and weren't drinking water. So we do need water for its own sake, no question about it.
Well, let me ask you this as well, because I see a lot of people get great water in amazing glass, maybe a dark glass that's, impermeable to light, but then they pour it into a thermos or, some kind of a stainless steel contraption or maybe a plastic little jug, and they carry it around with them all day. What's the implication of doing that, and does that actually hurt the water?
The metal ones give me the wrong vibe. I have to tell you honestly, Len, the metal containers, because they're electrically conductive. So as soon as you put that charged water in there, if that thing's in your hand, that charge is going to run into your hand. It's going to lose its own charge. And because it's metal, it's attracting oxygen from the atmosphere to the metal, or it's attracting positive charge. So as you walk around with that metal container all day long, it's going to start killing that water. It's just you can't get around that. Now, plastic, like the Nalgene plastic, the really hard plastic, and I'm not a fan of Nalgene, and I'm not a fan of vivisection or animal experiments and stuff that Nalgene is involved in, but nevertheless, their type of plastic is very good because it's an insulator. So as long as the plastic won't outgas, it's a great insulator. So you can hold it all day, and it doesn't conduct heat in, it doesn't conduct oxygen in electrically, so it's a better choice for, storing stuff in. Those are some thoughts on that. I mean, we always want to do whatever's available to us, and as we start taking action, it's going to get easier. We'll find out more stuff, and the right people will show up, and it just kind of happens automatically.